Hello, my name is Keenan Cornelius, and what we're doing here today, is a very monumental moment in my life, and potentially yours as well. Over the last 5 years actually, that I've been a black belt, I've been developing a very unique system of jiu-jitsu that is unlike anything that's ever really been seen before. I don't think it's hubris of me to say that I've changed the face of competitive jiu-jitsu with my unique techniques revolving around the lapel guard. So it all started as a purple belt when I was training at Lloyd Irvin's, and some of my teammates, it began as a necessity because, as we all know, jiu-jitsu is very difficult. One of the most difficult things, I was actually speaking with Miha about this the other day, that jiu-jitsu is probably the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life. The amount of time that it takes to improve, the actual physical exertion required to get in shape to just be able to handle fighting another human for an hour on end is gargantuan. And anything you can do to alleviate some of the physical requirements away from that is very beneficial and helpful. And that's the reason my Worm Guard, Lapel Guard series came into existence. It was out of necessity because I've never been a super athletic dude. I am now, but previously I wasn't. From like 16 to 22, I was very skinny. I was like 6'2", weighing like 180 pounds. At 19, I actually competed at lightweight, which is like 160. So I was like 6'2" lightweight, which is very slim. And when you're that small with that kind of frame, you don't really generate a lot of force. And training with people who are shorter than you, maybe with more compact muscle density, it can be really difficult to use a lot of the traditional jiu-jitsu moves, even though jiu-jitsu is supposed to be about strength, leverage and technique. You do find that a lot of positions do require some strength to escape from, and it's not always possible to have such perfect technique that you are negating someone's strength with your technique, especially when the technique is equal. Because once the technique is equal, strength and weight play a huge role. And when you're training in a room with a ton of other people, you're going to be rolling with people who are of equal or greater skill than you. And that is when strength would play a factor. So for me, building strength wasn't really an option. So for me to improve, I found that innovation was a key part of my success. And I was able to start using different leverages and different controls to help me find success, not only in the training room, but in competition. And it actually began with a very specific training partner of mine. His name was JT Torres. And to this day, he has my number. Maybe it's a big brother effect. I don't know what it is, but I cannot beat this guy no matter what I do. And every time I roll with him, I would just get smashed all the time, like to the point it was almost embarrassing. And I did well against everyone else. I would do well against people who did well against him. But for some reason, his understanding of my game was so, he had such a grasp on it that no matter what I did, he would always be one step ahead of me. And this is what drove it was the fire behind me creating all these techniques. It was always to try and just do better against JT. And some of the techniques I came up with in the beginning were kind of cheap, like borderline illegal, like putting my feet in the lapels in places and ways that are like not exactly fair, like putting them inside the gi, trying to just like be annoying by using it as like a spider grip, things like that. So it started off as just a desperate gripping for something, because one of the things that this guy was super good at is never allowing you to make grips on him. So every time I try and grab a sleeve or a collar, he would constantly break my grips, and I'd just be floundering in this sparring matchup, not having any grips. It was like I was fighting no gi against someone who had full control of my gi. So it happened one day as a purple belt that I just started gripping the only thing that was available, the one thing that he couldn't rip out of my hands, which was his lapel, or his belt in some cases. And once I actually was able to make grips on him and control in a little bit, it helped me have a little bit more success. And that was when the genesis of my lapel guard game was created. It was through that one single grip. It's like there it was, hanging there. Angelic music plays, the light shining down through the window, and I grabbed it, and that was the moment. And from there, I had to start creating positions that could work off of this single grip that I needed to survive the match or the training session or whatever. And of course, I put a lot of effort into all the fundamental jiu-jitsu and everything that's available to the overall knowledge of the jiu-jitsu world, the hive mind per se. And I adapted my lapel game into that and interwove it into the very fabric of current modern jiu-jitsu. And you may have heard a lot about worm guard, a lot about lapel guards, but the very unique thing about it is the knowledge of it is pretty much, what's the word? I'm really the only person that knows it.
Concentrated.
It's concentrated into my brain. And because I'm the person who has put the most amount of time into it, I've literally been working on it since 2010, 2011. I've been working on this system, and it grows every year. Every year I add new things. Every year something is exposed, a weakness is exposed, perhaps in competition, perhaps in training, and I'm forced to adapt my system to compensate for that. So the previous Worm Guard DVD was like, after only 1 year of the Worm Guard being a system in itself, just the Worm Guard, I had finally had a system that I was comfortable with, that I was ready to debut in black belt competition. And you could see the results of that from my very first black belt worlds, where I placed third in the absolute. I eventually lost to Buchecha in the absolute after a really awesome fight. You should go watch it. Prior to that, I beat Leandro Lo in the open weight. And I wouldn't say that's because I'm an excellent competitor or some sort of athletic super being like some of these black belts are today, but it was literally because of the element of surprise, like an element of unknown. I was going out there with techniques that no one had ever seen before, and that didn't matter how good you were. In jiu-jitsu, it doesn't matter how good you are. If a new technique is presented and it's effective and you don't know it, you're a white belt in that technique. So it wasn't that I was better than Leandro, because even to this day, I'm pretty sure it's like Leandro is better than me, overall in a competitive standpoint. I've lost him a few times, but what's cool about it is I was able to beat someone who on paper is better than me by using technique, right? So that's kind of contradictory, but that is the value of learning a unique system like this, is no one knows it. Even the people who play it, like I watch a lot of people who play it, but they're trying to learn through like just watching me compete. Maybe they have my Worm Guard DVD, but that was the first like budding system of it. It's blossomed like over fivefold since then. It's much deeper and much more complex as to what to do from each position. So at this point, it's no longer just like a grip that I use when I can get, and I have some sweeps from there, I have some attacks from there. Now it's like a full system. Like from every position in jiu-jitsu, I can get to my system, and I have an answer for any counters or any positions that I find myself in. And so what I'm going to try and do with this new course is I'm going to try and lay out as much as physically possible every possible situation, counter, position that you may find yourself in while playing the lapel guard system, whether it's worm guard, squid guard, gubber guard. We're going to be mixing all those together, covering all the details, covering all of the possible counters and situations you may find yourself in. So my goal for someone who is to watch this full course, right, like really each section of the course, focusing on each lapel guard. If you just watch one section, I want you to be able to go out into a training room or a competition, be able to get your grips, and just be fully comfortable there for the entirety of the fight. I don't want you to have to switch to anything else, like, oh, squid guard's not working for me, I have to switch back to closed guard. That shouldn't be the case, because the system in itself is almost foolproof. That's what's really unique about the lapel guard, is there isn't really any direct counters to it. The reason you see a lot of guards fade in and out of competition, like reverse De La Riva, for instance, isn't really played anymore in competition, which you may not know that if you're not an avid competitor. There's an inherent weakness in it that allows it to be shut down by a lot of really good black belts, and so you don't see it played as much anymore. Same thing with spider guard. A lot of really good spider guard players has kind of gone to the wayside because of modern passing understanding has kind of shut down spider guard. Formerly great spider guard players like Michael Lange have kind of faded into the background a little bit because the guard isn't as effective. And the cool thing about lapel guard is it's kind of time proof. Like the grips in themselves, there isn't a way to just counter it with a specific body movement. Like it requires the person breaking the grip. Just because of the way the mechanics of the position, it locks you to the person. And so it's kind of a unique thing where every other guard that you play, someone can literally just pop your grip. And that's why in jiu-jitsu, popping grips is so important, because they pop the grip and you have to regrip to something else. You have to move to a new position. You have to do something else. But with the lapel guard, there's no easy way for someone to just pop your hand off their lapel. If you have a pretty strong grip, this grip is not strippable, and which is why people are people who are unfamiliar with the position are so annoyed by it. It forces them to have to change their entire style of passing, because every good black belt style of passing is break grips and then pass. In the moment that the person on bottom loses their grip, there's an opening for the person on top to attack, and that is the rock, paper, scissors of jiu-jitsu. They break their grip, they initiate a pass, you regrip, reguard, and then they break their grip again, and then the cycle repeats. But when you have a lapel involved, that grip, regrip, that grip, regrip game is not really in play anymore. It's more about them having to untangle themselves with movement rather than stripping a grip and then moving. So it's kind of a unique thing, and it requires a little bit of a mind shift of how you play jiu-jitsu, because it's no longer a push and pull. It's not as simple as pushing and pulling, which is most of what jiu-jitsu is. It's a pressure, pushing, and pulling. Whereas when you involve a lapel, there's a lot of rotational forces. Friction is involved. Friction adds to the position and makes it much harder for people to move. There's a lot more abstract leverage involved, which I'm going to explain as we get into the meat and potatoes of the techniques. So yes, that's kind of the lowdown of what we're going to be trying to shoot here today, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. The way this course is going to be structured is going to be a little different than what you may be used to if you are an avid jiu-jitsu instructional watcher. Most jiu-jitsu instructionals focus on a specific position and then hitting you with just as many techniques as they can fit as possible into their time slot, or however long the DVD is. I like to take a little bit more of a systematic approach where each technique can stand alone by itself. It has you can just take any one technique and add it into your game and it will be effective. But the way I'm going to teach it is showing you how, if you want to, you could have an entirely new style of jiu-jitsu that you wouldn't have to incorporate into your current game. But at the same time, you will be able to take bits and pieces if you want. But the lapel guard as a whole is much more powerful when you use it all together. And that's what's going to be interesting about this. For me to put it all on video, because it's all in my brain and instinctually I can go into all the positions naturally. I don't really have to think about it. But it is a very complex lattice work, and it does branch outwardly. So it starts with the basics of the lapel controls and the positions themselves: ringworm guard, squid guard, worm guard, reverse delta worm guard, gubber guard. Those are the base foundations, and that's what we're going to start with. We'll start with each one and then explore the branching opportunities that specific guard can take you in, depending on the reactions of your opponent and depending on your aggressiveness and your ability to initiate the next position. Now, each of those positions can transfer into the other positions, such as worm guard switching into ringworm guard. They all work together themselves. A good analogy for what lapel guard has done to jiu-jitsu is very similar to what has happened in the nogi realm of jiu-jitsu recently, where John Danaher's leg lock system has sort of opened people's eyes as to what you can do with the lower half of the human body. And that new knowledge has took a lot of people by surprise and allowed his team to be very successful with their specific unique knowledge. The lapel guard is very similar to that. However, I'm not a jiu-jitsu coach. I don't have a team under me that I teach. However, I'm very confident that if I did, I would have an army of lapel killers wrecking the competition system.
Also, if I may, why ignore 50% of the lapel? The bottom
it is
half
true. Yes,
is
most
there.
people only grip the top part of the lapel. So yeah, most of what we will be doing is based off the lower end of the lapel, which is an unexplored territory, because it's limp. People grip. I'm sure people grip this priorly, but where is the control here? The lapel in itself doesn't give you control until you start adding something to it. It's like a material that is limp until you add electricity to it or something. You need to add something to it to get control. So that is how what we're going to be kind of focusing on, as well as the submissions we're going to get into. It's going to be involving a lot of the lower lapel stuff as well. So yeah, that's kind of the mission goal here, a little bit about the lapel and a little bit about how you're going to be viewing this. Oh, and the other thing is this, as you may have noticed, this is not a normal DVD where it's all going to be one chunk of 9 hours that you can flip through with chapter markers. It should be on a USB drive that you have received in some eloquent packaging, hopefully, and it will be each individual video file will be separate, so you can click around. I would recommend watching it in order. However, if you feel you have a grasp on a certain position, maybe if you previously watched the original Wormguard DVD and you want to skip over some of the Wormguard stuff and get to the more the newer Squid Guard and Gubber Guard information, that's fine. But I am going to be adding a lot of new insight that I've gained over the years to the original Wormguard system. So it's not going to be a carbon copy. A lot has changed over the last 3 years since we filmed the original Wormguard DVD, and I'm going to be adding everything new that I feel needs to be added into that system itself. So I recommend rewatching it, and you will learn some new things, even if you've religiously poured over the original Wormguard footage. So to start off the course, I need to lay some groundwork and teach some basic understanding of grips, because this entire system is based off of grips, and jiu-jitsu in general is based off of grips. If you have the grip control, that is probably the key factor of if you're winning the fight or losing the fight. If you're gripping, chances are you're doing well. If you're pushing, that's a sign that they've broken your grips and they've initiated a position to where you're forced to only defend. And if you're defending, you're probably losing. Because unlike other martial arts, jiu-jitsu has no repercussions for being too aggressive. In boxing, if you're too aggressive, you can get knocked out or something like that. In jiu-jitsu, if you're aggressive, it usually means that the person is forced to defend. And if they're forced to defend, they're usually going to be pushing on you instead of gripping you and pulling them in. So that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit about. I'm going to tell you a little bit of the difference between traditional jiu-jitsu grips versus the lapel jiu-jitsu grip, and why it is not better or worse, but unique. Okay, so one of the most common jiu-jitsu grips there is the basic hand on the collar grip. When I grip someone's collar here like this, it gives me a very strong post, but also a pull. Okay, so most grips in jiu-jitsu either have, they're very linear. It's forward and back. I'm pushing against him. If I don't want him to put pressure on me, I'm pushing him away, right? If I feel in defensive mode, I don't want him to put pressure, I push. If I feel like I'm the one who needs to be attacking at that moment, I can be pulling, breaking his posture, keeping him down closer to my legs and closer to the danger zone of triangles, submission attempts, and possible sweeps. So, in this moment, he needs to worry about breaking my grip. Once he breaks my grip, I don't have control, and now he is free to initiate his grips onto me and do something offensive himself, okay? So, having grips is super important. The collar grip here is probably the most common. A variation of that would be the cross grip, putting my hand in the lapel here. This has a slightly different function, but very ever so slightly. Having a cross grip changes the control you have over your opponent a little bit by allowing for slight rotational movement. Okay, this grip here, I can't turn his shoulders or the way he's facing just with this grip. Going left to right, there's no leverage here. But with a cross grip, because of the diagonal angle my arm is taking, when I pull here, it does slightly change the way he's facing and can expose him to other opportunities. So if I take a cross grip in this hand, for instance, I'm here, I can pull. From here, I could potentially escape my hips and start attacking his back. So certain things are exposed when you change the way the person is facing. With a traditional straight-on, same-side grip, I don't have that option. I can only pull him to me. If I go left or right, you can see he doesn't face any other way and his back is not exposed. His arms aren't exposed for potential overhooks, arm drags, his leg doesn't come up. So taking grips that allow for rotational control is very valuable. And so that's something that the lapel guard is really good at, where traditional grips are not as good at. I can force my opponent to face a certain direction. And that's one of the key reasons the lapel guard is very successful, because with one grip, it requires slightly more setup. It allows me to control the rotational movement. Where another example of a grip would be the sleeves grip, or the cat's paw grip, or if you have really bad fingers, the pistol grip means a grip like this. I usually go for a cat's paw grip. Now this grip is very good, but a lot of people actually prefer the collar grip over this because this is a one-way grip. I can only pull. This is my control point. Pulling, if I want to initiate any sort of pushing motion, I have to incorporate another limb. Either another grip, which allows for me to push, or a foot to provide some counter leverage here. So in this situation, I would be able to push him away if he starts to engage. So I can pull him in if I need to, or push him away. Okay? But still, I'm not really getting any rotational movement. It's going to be pretty hard for me to turn his body and sort of expose him, right? Because of course, when you're facing someone here, he wants to be square with me. If he starts turning too much, no one's going to attack your guard like this, because the second he starts to turn, he's exposing himself. I can take his back, I can grab his pants, I can do all manner of stuff. It's not natural for someone to turn their body like that. So when we can force those situations, it leaves many more attack options. Of course, jiu-jitsu's been around so long, people have adapted to use these less rotational control grips and still be very effective with them, obviously. But like I was speaking earlier in the introduction, some guards, like Spider Guard, for instance, have kind of fallen to the wayside as very subtle techniques have been introduced, such as tucking your hand underneath and re-gripping. If someone, it's like, this is almost impossible to stop just because of the nature of Spider Guard. It's very hard for me to keep someone's hand locked to where they can't just do this simple grip break. If they do that, I'm going to be forced to have to let go. The second he goes, I'm going to have to be forced to let go and try to do some sort of other guard and recover into a different way. Okay? The same thing applies if I have a collar grip. If I have a collar grip here, this is super strong. I can yank the guy, I can push his knee out, I can start attacking like this, but the second he puts both hands on my collar, or on the grip that's on his collar here, and breaks it, now I'm in danger because I don't have this control. He's immediately going to get underhooks and start putting pressure, and I'm going to have to change my entire guard playing style to deal with such a simple counter. The counter being the grip break. So I would have to fall into half guard or something else like that. So that's a concept called the layers of guard. And if you're playing a normal, traditional guard, you can start with a guard such as Spider Guard, but as the person breaks your grips, he's going to work his way through your defenses until eventually he gets to smash half or double unders, or a position that's at the lower levels of the layers of guard. We don't need to go into the layers of guard because we're not focusing on traditional jiu-jitsu grips. Because in the worm guard and lapel guards, the grips don't just break. It's not as simple as the guy, he breaks your grip, and you have to adjust to a different position. It's the opposite. Once I get my grip, they're not going anywhere. And now it's just a matter of me sequentially breaking down their posture, changing the way they're facing, changing the directions of their pressure, their knee pressure as they try and go for knee cuts and things of that nature. And we are going to be using more rotational control. Rotational and posture control. So now let's talk a little bit about the lapel and why it's different. So the reason the lapel guard works is because of the mechanics of how a gi fits on the human body. And you'll see this lapel here, if you can just raise your arm. The tension when I pull is low. This is the part of the gi that is taut as I pull. The lapel itself still has some slack, as you can see. So it's not necessarily pulling from the collar down. It's actually pulling from his waist, which is a very important detail. Because most other upper body grips are connected to his shoulder line here. The sleeve goes to his shoulder. That's where my pressure is coming, upwards, up near the top of his body. Collar as well, controlling from the top of his body. But when I grip the lapel, it actually goes from his waist, which is weird. So it's like, well, why do we want to control his waist? Well, because his waist is what controls the direction he's facing. See how his hips and his knees are facing me here? If I pull on his sleeve and I pull it this way, his knees and hips are still facing me. Only his upper body changes, like this. But if I pull the lapel, depending on which side of the lapel I pull, you'll see it'll actually make his foot step forward. Obviously just this motion is not going to do it. But if I were to pull hard enough, once we get into the actual lapel controls, it's going to be putting pressure on his hip here, and then it actually will go up behind his body here to the opposite side of his ribs. That's what gets tight. The lapel and the gi turns into the gi material on his back, and it pulls from the other side of his body. So it creates this almost like I have a deep underhook. Imagine I have a deep underhook. If I were to pull, it rotates his body. So the same thing is effectively the same thing when I'm pulling on the lapel. Okay? But just like Spider Guard, gripping the lapel in itself, it's limp, it's weak, it's not really going to do much. And that's why we have to incorporate our legs. my legs and his legs to actually give it strength. And that's the sort of the puzzle that needs to be figured out to play the lapel guards and worm guards. It's finding a way to incorporate my legs to give this unique control power. And that is where the very first worm guard position came into existence, which we're going to get into now. So before we actually get into the lapel guard positions, one problem I see a lot of people, beginning lapel guard users, worm guard users, they have difficulty gripping the lapel, and in that time while they're trying to set up the grips, they're stuck with a limp lapel. And if you just have a limp lapel in your hand while you're seated, go ahead, stand up for me, it's better for me to show you. So say I want to play lapel guard, whatever lapel guard I'm going to be playing, whether it's worm, squid, gupper, whatever. If you grip the lapel first, like this, and then as I just like lazily try and get to my position, I don't really have any grips or control here. It's going to be very easy for the person to maneuver around, potentially get really strong grips on my legs and toreando me, while all I have is just this useless bit of fabric. So, intermediary lapel controls are controls in which it's more of an open guard, rather than something tight like the worm guard, or really secure like the squid guard, or more of like a closed guard like the gupper guard. It's when it's open, okay? You still need to incorporate your feet to provide that countermeasure, that counter pull that gives this lapel energy and strength and allows me to actually use it on my opponent, okay? So the most simple thing you can possibly do is when you have the lapel grip is you're gonna lay flat on your back and put both feet on each shoulder, okay? So now I have a pull, which pulls his body into my feet, and I have a push to take the slack out of the lapel, and this is gonna give me a solid control. This is one intermediary lapel position. So I'll rotate this way a little so you can see here. I have my feet on the biceps or the shoulders. I actually prefer to go on the shoulders because if I go to the biceps, he still has control over my legs and can start to weave them out and do traditional spider guard breaks to deal with my lapel control. So I like to double up on the lapel because putting both hands on the lapel allows you to quickly switch from one side to the other, because the worm guard is very unique that it doesn't have to be played just on one side. You don't have to just get really good playing with one grip. You can use both your hands and switch to either side. So I like to keep both on until I'm ready to decide what type of lapel guard I'm going to be playing. So putting my feet here is a very good start. The reason for this is now if he tries to do traditional guard passes, for instance, a leg drag. If he tries to leg drag me here, you can see my foot has created a wedge, I would say, in the side of the lapel here. It's wedged in there. It's going to be very difficult for him to just throw my leg across. So this is sort of like a backup control for me. I have my foot on the shoulder. If he tries to pass to the other side, the same thing occurs. I'm just going to try and guide my foot into a position where he can't actually complete his pass. Okay? So that's the most basic thing. If he tries to toreando me downward, same thing. I want to put my foot in the lapel. Now, this position doesn't have a name other than just another one of the intermediary lapel positions. There's the foot on the shoulder, like so. Another one is what's called the stirrup, and that is when someone tries to put my legs down. So if I just leave my feet here and he tries to pin my legs flat to the mat, he's going to pin them. And now I'm stuck with the lapel, and he's going to do some sort of pass, and I'm screwed. So as you're waiting to set up your guard while the guy's going crazy trying to pass you, because this is the most difficult part of lapel guard, is just getting to the position. Once you're there, it's super strong. So what I've done to help myself is I've gotten very comfortable playing open guard with the lapel. And now it doesn't require a lot of dexterity or flexibility like a lot of other open guards require. It just requires some precise foot placement and a little bit of understanding that he's probably going to try a certain guard pass. So if he goes left to right, it's easy. I'm just putting my foot in the lapel to keep him in front of me and not allow him to get too close to break my position. If he starts to try and push my legs down like this with a toreando motion, I need to make sure that my heel goes inward so that it creates a little pocket. There's a little pocket here in the lapel that is a perfect spot for my heel. And I put my foot there, so now if he tries to push my legs down, it just catches on this lapel. And I just sort of engage my hamstring here, pulling inward like I'm doing a leg curl. And this does two things. One, it secures my foot to the lapel so he can't just pop it down and out or anything. And it also breaks his posture a little bit. Now he's carrying a little bit of my weight. So if he tries to stand up straight, I am pulling on the lapel and using my heel to keep him down. Here. So this takes away two of his options. the left to right options and the downward option, right? So if he tries to push my legs down, he cannot. If he tries to push them left to right, my foot is still catching on the lapel on both sides, controlling. Okay? The final position or movement he may try to make to deal with me grabbing his lapel is pushing my feet upwards, like this. And this is an equally awkward thing. If he gets my feet up off of the lapel and I'm just hanging onto the lapel, I'm probably going to get my guard passed. I would have to let go and switch to other grips, which is what we don't want. That's the whole reason lapel guard is strong, is because we do not have to ever let go of the lapel, other than switching it between our hands. I don't want you to ever have to switch to another guard, okay? So, to stop that, when we feel him start to change his hands to change to more of an upward stacking pass, I'm just going to slide my heel out and put it underneath now, like this. I'm still driving upward, and I'm still using it to create tension in the lapel so I have control. But now if he continues to drive me upward, no matter where I go, he's coming with me because I have this control. If he switches back to going downward, for instance, I need to put my heel back. And then side to side, same deal. Here, here. So we need to be fluid in the motion. So it's just heel in or heel under. Notice how my foot is sideways here. I've turned it sideways. I'm not like this. If I just go here, it's still going to slide. I need to make sure that I turn it into like a cross motion, so it's creating a T across the lapel. That's what's going to give me the control I need. Okay? Now this doesn't require flexibility. I'm just keeping my legs straight. I'm laying flat on my back. I'm just creating strong leverage here, using the friction of the gi on my foot so it doesn't slide away too easily. Ideally, you want to have it right at where lapels have this split in the skirt. That's a really good spot. A little deeper is fine as well if they have a longer gi, but this is just fine. Just anywhere in this area. Not under the armpit though. Don't go under the armpit. Keep it just in front of the shoulder, but I'm driving upwards so that my heel is exposed underneath. And that is how you control. So if he starts to move around, left to right, I'm just here. I'm driving down if he tries to do toreando. If he starts to drive up, I'm going to switch, put my foot up, and just calmly try and recover back to the center position each time. He's going to be expending a lot more energy than me because he's using his muscles and I'm using leverage and friction to hang on. The only muscle I'm actually exerting is my grip, which is probably the easiest grip to maintain in jiu-jitsu, and a little bit of pushing motion with my legs. So not a lot of dexterity is required. You probably saw as he's going left to right, I do need to incorporate a concept of recovery called cross-stepping, which is where you take the opposite foot and pass it across to replace a hook. So whenever you're playing guard and you have a spider-like hook, they always address this hook first and then try and pass. So as he tries to, he'll break the grip like so, and then he'll try and initiate a pass, usually to the side that they broke the grip. When that happens, you can replace the hook with a cross step. So as he breaks his grip, I replace it with a cross step. So it sort of eliminates the time where I'm vulnerable. Because if he weaves his hand out and I don't take a cross step, I'm very vulnerable in this motion. I have to start pushing. I'm going to have to do a big scramble, possibly even invert to recover. But if you can get the timing down, knowing he wants to deal with the control position, I'm just going to go a cross step. Use that to replace my original foot. The same thing applies with the lapel. As he tries to start to leg drag to one side or the other, here, I just engage a cross step. Using the cross step like this, turn this way a little. Put the cross step in, just don't keep him away, and then I use it to recover. I don't want to stay there. Okay? And those are the 4 main recovery and control motions of just holding the lapel before we actually get into any of the positions themselves. So there's just a couple of things you need to avoid, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about another control position. It's very tempting if you are more accustomed to traditional guards, such as spider, De La Riva, half guard, things like that. Use a lot of like feet in the hips, especially with like collar sleeve. In jiu-jitsu, people really like to put their feet in the hips and like push the knees and stuff like that. If you're using the lapels, that's a little counterproductive because putting my feet in the hips like this, if he postures, and even a little bit, I don't really have enough torque to like bend his posture back. Because like I said, this part isn't really engaged. The slack is on his hip, or the tautness is on his hips. This is slack. So I don't really have a downward pull yet. That only comes once we incorporate our legs into like worm guard and stuff. So from here, try and avoid putting your feet on the hips and on the knees, because it's going to be very easy for him to just pass your legs. You just can push them down, do any sort of guard pass he wants, and you don't really have any reinforcement using the lapel. So you're kind of taking away from the strengths of the position if you start putting your feet on the lapels or knees. So really try and keep your feet high here, like this, so that you can actually use the lapel grip with your heel, your feet, and underneath, because everything's going to be based around this. Of course, also you can do it to either side. Either lapel works, which is nice about this position. So from here. Now, that's just one small detail that I needed to add. And now there's another control that's very, very strong, but it also has a weakness, and that's what you don't really want to stick to this position too long, and that's the lapel lasso. So a traditional lasso would look like this. If I have his sleeve, this is lasso guard, right? I wrap my leg around his arm, and I hook my foot behind his back and try and control his posture a little bit and isolate this arm so he can't use it effectively against me. I do the same thing with the lapel here. All I do is lasso it and shoot my foot through. Not super far, but I do want to take out as much slack as I can here. So this control now, if he tries to posture, look, once we incorporate our leg into a motion, look what's strong now, this part. So now we have the strength in the rotational movement around the lower part of his back with just the lapel, but now we have some downward control too, breaking his posture. All while only using one hand, right? Every other guard that you play needs two hands to accomplish this. So already the efficiency is doubled here, which is very useful to have. Now, this grip here, the only weakness for it is if he manages to push this leg down, because I don't have this leg engaged on his lapel. So if he focuses a lot on this and starts to move around this way, you can lose a little bit of the control here. So be very aware of a person passing to the side opposite of your lapel grip. Now, but it's very easy to stop this, okay? All you need to do is heavily focus on turning inward towards the side of the lapel, okay? You can even grab his collar here or even another sleeve if you feel like it gives you better control. You don't have to let this hand be going rodeo style. The reason we have an extra hand is the control is strong, but now we have an extra hand to do whatever we want to even further power the position and give even more of an advantage to ourselves. So I like to grip the collar here or even the sleeve. You could even, if you're a real stally type, do double lasso here. I don't suggest this. I prefer to just go for the collar. And like I said, these are intermediary lapel controls, meaning they're transitional. I'm not trying to stay here. This is not the strongest option I have. It's only while I'm trying to engage into the lapel guards we're going to cover further on, right? So I have the lapel control. I want to keep this leg out as far as I can, because the closer I get it to his body, the easier it's going to be for him to put pressure and potentially get to a good position. He still hasn't broken the grip per se, but he may be able to get to like a smash position where I'm stuck with the lapel and I can't create space, which we want to avoid. We want to keep the distance in this specific situation. Another thing you can do that can help you keep your body rotated is cross grip on the lapel. Cross gripping here allows me to exert control on the opposite side of his body, like the pants. Now, if he tries to walk around to the weak side of the grip, I have this pant leg to keep me in position. Notice I'm turned towards him a little bit on my side, but not too far. I keep my hips flat, but I rotated my body a little more perpendicular. This will keep me safe here. Now there's many entries into the worm guard, squid guard, any sort of guard you can imagine from this, but it's a very strong, like, hey, slow down position, right? If someone's being really crazy and like fast and you can't keep up with their movements, this is what I usually go to. I'll go to a position where I can lock myself to them, secure it, and let them sort of wear themselves out while I just hang on. Then once they slow down a little bit, I would engage into my lapel entries, which we'll be going into after we cover these intermediary positions. The final thing is it's super tempting to lasso like this. And you can do it. But the only problem is if he's actively moving and maintaining posture, when I try and go like this, sometimes you might not be able to get it all the way through before he lassos, or before he moves your foot or his hips out of the position to actually get the strong lasso. So if you're doing this, you kind of need to make sure that this leg would be forward, like almost like in a De La Riva. Controlling this would make it a lot easier. So now if he tries to posture up and turn his hips away, I would still be able to get my foot through Okay? So that's how you can do it if you absolutely want to lasso it in this normal way. There's a little bit of an easier way to do it. How I like to do it here is I go to my other intermediary positions here with the feet higher up controlled, maybe even the stirrup position here. And what I'll do is I'll just pass it around my leg and get the grip. So what that's done is I've left myself no opportunity to fall behind in the tempo of the match. If I start to take my leg off, I've let go of control. I don't have control over his body, and I'm going to be fishing for the grip, and then he can kind of start engaging on me and taking me out of the control points. So I want to try and be as seamless as possible as I start setting up my grips, and one of the first things you can do to help you be efficient in your movements is just passing it around your leg instead. So I just go over the top of my shin, keeping my grips on the lapel the entire time, and then passing. You never want to just toss it. You're not ever going to let go of the control. Keep both hands on the lapel until you have a secure grip with the other, then you can let go of the other hand, if you so desire. I like to play the lapel lasso with the cross grip so that I don't have to switch back again, because I'm all about eliminating grip switches. One of the weaknesses in the early worm guards is there's too many grip switches, and the more you switch the grips, the more opportunities he has to get his lapel back and potentially break your grip. So I like to just be as little grip switches as possible, and I'll show you a lot of the ways to eliminate grip switches as we go through the course. This is one of the first ones. Taking it over the top, passing it underneath. That's only one grip switch. I put my foot through his hip, past his hip here on the right. You can see here, go over the top of my knee and pass. Sometimes I'll even keep my foot on the bicep here, and I'll lasso with the bicep control. If someone likes to put a lot of pressure, I usually switch to this one so that I can keep them off of me. Because if I go here, like this, if they manage to get super close, I don't have as much pushing pressure because my foot is free here and it's more past the hip. So that's an option as well that you can keep with the lapel lasso control. You can put it at the hip itself, as long as you make sure to turn inward to the side that you're attacking. This helps use the weight of your knee to pull on his collar, breaking his posture, help you with the rotational control of making him face this way, and stops him from stepping around to our weak side in this position, which would be over here. Just remember, if someone starts to step around to the weak side, it's not over. It just means you need to switch back to the intermediary control. So don't get tunnel vision on one specific lapel grip. You can't just say, oh, I'm a stirrup master and I'm just going to stay here the whole time, because then he's going to push your leg up. Every jiu-jitsu position has a weakness. The skill comes into the timing and understanding that as they use their position and control to counter it, you adjust to the new position that compensates for that. So if I'm in a stirrup here and he starts to drive upward, I would go underneath. If he starts to drive downward, I would go back to the stirrup. And if I feel like he's posturing too much maybe, I would want to try and go to the lasso. But if he stands up too straight, I would have to go around this way, right? Even if you go ahead and stand up straight, I can't lasso this way, but I can still lasso this way, no matter how great their posture is. And then I sit to my position here. This is something I've been doing a lot, and it works really effectively on standing and kneeling opponents. Because if someone's down on the ground on their knees, lapel guard is obviously still good, but it can be difficult to set up your worm guards if his knees are flat. But from the lapel lasso, there's a lot of entries and options that we can cover and get to, which we'll get into later in the course. But for now, we're talking about just controlling from before we have any actual worm guard setups. The final detail of the pre-focus that you need before you get into actually setting up the lapel guards is how do you even get a lapel grip? His belt is tied, strapped in there. How are we trying to retrieve the lapel grips? There's a few ways, and it changes from position to position, whether you're standing, whether you're playing guard, whether you're on top. There's some different ways to open them. The most common that I show first is from standing. So we're going to be standing here for a second. Most fights start on the feet, unless you train in a gym, which you start on the knees, in which case you should switch gyms. Just kidding, but try and start on your feet, but not really. I'm just saying that to not insult anyone. Anyway, standing on your feet is a huge part of jiu-jitsu, and you should definitely learn how to start on your feet. When we're standing, I want the lapel right away. I don't want to start playing guard, especially in a competitive situation. I don't want to start playing guard without a lapel open. because I'm going to have to play traditional guards until his lapel opens up. And I'm not just going to wait for his belt to slowly loosen over time and then, oh, the lapel's finally opened up. No, I'm going to take an aggressive stance to get that lapel first. And I use a lot of lapel techniques from standing, not only to attack, but it's actually a really strong anti-judo defense using lapel guard, believe it or not. So the most simple way is we're going to use some traditional martial arts here. We're going to use our tiger claw attack to open the lapel. So I'm just going to, this isn't a joke. The best way to open the lapel is actually to turn your hand in a swiping motion, like you're about to disembowel your opponent with one single swipe. And you just try and hook your fingers, as many as you can get in. Sometimes only one will make it in, depending on how much he's defending my grips. A lot of times I like to fake it out by reaching here, and as he goes to block my grip here, I go low. Yeah, right. Totally tricked it. So just a reverse tiger swipe is the best way to just open the top lapel. Coincidentally, you'll find that my best lapel guard grips are on my opponent's left lapel. That's because most people are trained to fold their left lapel over the right, so that's the lapel that's available. One time I actually had to fight my professor, and he realized this, and he came to the match with the lapel switched. And I went to try and open his lapel, and it was backwards. And I was like, what? And I had to do it to the other side, and then a lot of my attacks had to come off my weak side lapel, so that was super smart of him. But in our case, you're not going to have a high-level world champion professor that you have to fight. So the left lapel is probably going to be the one you're attacking. So I would open it with my right hand, coming across and opening it. Of course, there's many ways to open it. You can also just grab it and yank it out slowly. But going low like this is a little more effective because it's going to pull it out from the belt. Because if you just pull from here, a lot of his lapel stays in the belt. And it can make, you don't get as much slack. So by going here and going wide and across, it allows me to get a little bit more of his lapel out, like that. And then I can grip it here. From this position, I pull guard with the lapel, but my intention is to make sure that my feet get to my intermediary lapel positions right away. There's a couple ways to do that. One, you can do the traditional guard style pull, where in jiu-jitsu where you take your grips and you put your foot in the hip and then you sit down. I actually prefer not to do that because it takes a lot of my, you don't want me to fall through the wall? Yeah. Okay. It takes a lot of my balance away. I have to awkwardly lift my foot, put it in the hip. In that motion, he might tackle me, he might foot sweep me, or he might just throw my leg past as I sit. Then I'm going to be screwed. And all of my lapel work was for nothing. So I actually pull in a very passive manner to ensure that I can get my feet to the right way. I'll post on him just to make sure that I know he's not going to shoot on me, right? So I need to have a little bit of control here so I know he just doesn't shoot on my legs. I retreat a little, and I sit to my butt. As I sit, I'm falling away in anticipation of his movement coming towards me, right? If I fall straight to my back, if I pull guard like this, and I go straight to my back, he may already start engaging on me before I can get my legs into position to block. So this is a very small detail, but it's very important if you're pulling guard with the lapel. I sit and continue creating space, moving away from him to compensate for his forward movement so I can get my feet into position before he can get any offensive attack. So that's just another way to add a little bit of control into your pull so you don't find yourself free falling through midair with him aggressively passing your guard. Another option we have to get the lapel from standing is a lapel lasso from standing. So this one I actually do the traditional style where I put my foot up. But as I put my foot up, I pass the lapel under my leg. So I'm going to pull and pass the lapel under my leg as I pull. So this eliminates the problem of him throwing my leg to one side or the other because I effectively get my lapel control before I even hit the ground. Okay? So a lot of the options where someone can knee tap you or take you down or throw your leg to one side or the other are eliminated if you can do it fast enough. So I'm here. I'll still post on him just to make sure I have a little bit of control and I can feel him if he's making any jerky movements to take me down or do a foot sweep or something. I lift my leg up. I fall to the same side. And as I fall, I'm pushing the lapel under my leg and then switching it. Grab the pants, grab the collar, grab the leg, and then from here or from one of the other intermediary positions, we'll be entering into our lapel guards. So now let's say we find ourselves in a position where we're either already on our back or we were taken down without having lapel control, or maybe we had the lapel control, but he ripped it from our hands and now we're on our back playing normal guards without a lapel grip and it's stuck in his gi still. So how do I get the lapel from here? Because we run into the same problem where if I just start reaching for it like this, I don't really have any real guard control. And as I'm doing this, he could do anything to me. And by the time I actually get the lapel out, I could already have my guard passed. So you need to open the lapel from positions where you actually still have control. So this is why it's important to know or learn some traditional jiu-jitsu guards to fill in these blank spots. So let's start with like the most common open guard, which would be De La Riva. I'm going to grab the pants, the De La Riva. I have my De La Riva hook here like this, and maybe I have the sleeve or the collar here. I usually probably go with the sleeve just because I'm a longer guy, but if you're a little shorter, these guys prefer collar grips. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to imitate that tiger swipe I did earlier. I'm just going to use my foot this time because I want to have strong control over him. And if you look, my foot's really not doing anything here. It's not super important as part of the control. It's just on his hip to keep him away from me a little bit. So all I'm going to do is use that to keep him away from me. And then look, I just see how there's a little opening here in his collar. Lift your head, Miha, so they can see. There's a little opening. All I'm going to do is put my toes inside of it, and I'm going to kick it out. See that? Look how much slack I've opened up in the lapel. From here, as I kick it out, I just use my foot. I can kind of hook it back to me, or you can just let it fall and then get your grip. I maintain my grips on the pants or whatever other guard I was playing. You may even have had lasso. It all applies. And then I would either go to my own lapel lasso or put my feet in the biceps and go to this intermediary position. Okay? So another example, go ahead and tuck it back in. Let's just, for the sake of demonstration, we'll do it from spider guard now. The exact same thing applies. Create a little space, free my foot, put my toes inside, and kick it out. Once it's there, I just grab the lapel. As simple as that. Go to foot on the bicep, go to lasso, or go to the foot under grip position as a point of control. Okay? If he's on his knees, it's not as important because when someone is passing on their knees, they don't have any lateral agility. So if he goes on his knees...
Plus they're over 40, so they have no agility.
Right. So they're on their knees. Chances are they're a big guy because they're passing on their knees. In this position, you can play whatever you want. You just literally grab the lapel and open it. It's the easiest thing to do. The downside is that it's pretty hard to set up a lot of worm guard positions on people with their knees down. The plus side is that putting your both knees on the mat leaves you open for triangles and armors and omoplatas. So in general, it's not a good idea to pass on your knees. So some people, when they're playing against someone they know is a lapel guard user, they'll purposely pass on their knees. In which case, it's a good idea to get very good at close guard. And that's why the close guard gubber guard system is really strong, because it counters people who put both their knees on the mat, trying to avoid worm guard, reverse Delaware worm guard, squid guard, things like that. So that's why the gubber guard system is super strong, which we'll get into later on. So yeah, that's how you open up a lapel. One thing to note is everything I'm saying also applies to the belt. Maybe that's a topic for another discussion, but literally every worm guard, squid guard position, with the exception of gubber guard, can be played on a belt grip as well. Same concepts apply of feet on both sides, lassoed, and under. A good example of this is my match with Sanji Hibero. I played a lot of this because he hit his lapels really well. Literally every position that you do can also be done with the belt. So if you want to get crazy, you can also use the belt. Or say they tie their belt so tight that you can't pull the lapel out. You can just use the belt. Some guys that I've taught worm guard to are actually better at it with the belt grip. Like Andres, for instance, has done a lot with the belt worm. And Lucas Barbosa as well, one of my teammates who picks up a little bit of this stuff, uses the belt as well. So you can be a little creative and use the belt. The downside is the belts come off sometimes. So if you're gripping it and it comes untied, then you're stuck with a limp belt in your hand. So that's something to think about. So those are the few ways you can get lapel control. And we talked about how to use that lapel to maintain control while you're setting up your positions, which we're finally now going to show you how to get into the first fundamental lapel guard position, the worm guard.